Hey gang, I got an offer for you today from LinkedIn. As business-to-business marketers, your needs are unique. B2B buying cycles are long and your customers face incredibly complex decisions. Isn't it time you had a marketing platform built specifically for you? LinkedIn ads empower marketers with solutions for you and your customers. LinkedIn ads allow you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. On LinkedIn, you have direct access to build relationships with decision makers. Of the 875 million users on the network, 180 million are senior level executives. 10 million are C-level executives. You will also be able to drive results with targeting and measuring with their tools built specifically for B2B. And best of all, they work. Audiences exposed to brand messages on LinkedIn are 6 times more likely to convert. LinkedIn ads also rank number 1 for security, community, and ad experience as part of the Business Insider's Digital Trust Study. Make B2B marketing everything it can be and get a $100 credit. It's a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. It's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. Entrepreneurs Enigma is a podcast for the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. It's about the wins and the fails that we all face being entrepreneurs, and how we learn from adversity. Every week I talk to a different entrepreneur with a story to tell. I'm Seth Goldstein. Come with me on the journey. This is Entrepreneurs Enigma. Let's get started.
Hi, you probably weren't expecting me, but I'm Ian Truscott, a listener of this podcast and host of the Rockstar CMO effing Marketing Podcast, another podcast on the Marketing Podcast Network. And to celebrate the 100th episode of Entrepreneurs Enigma, I suggested we turn the tables and discover Seth's story. Welcome, Seth, to your own show.
How are you, mate? This is Inception.
Anyway, mate, where shall we start? It's episode 100, so
I can't believe it. Believe it. It's 100 episodes.
Yeah.
I think I've hit 100 episodes in the past on other podcasts, but was not aware of it. So it wasn't kind of like, oh my gosh, I have to do something special for it. So I can't think of anyone better to flip the tables with than with you, Ian.
Thank you, mate. You're an experienced hand at this podcasting thing, and you started way before many of us, and me included. You started in 2010 with Social Media Addicts. What inspired you to start Entrepreneurs Enigma after experience that you'd already had?
Well, Entrepreneurs Enigma came after I was on a hiatus from Digital Marketing Dive, the other podcast we have on the Marketing Podcast Network, and it's back on hiatus subsequently again. There's me, it's me and another co-host usually, and it takes a lot more effort than me just scheduling and doing podcasts. Like Entrepreneurs Enigma is just me and the guest. But so I was actually in Vermont at my mom's house. I'm based down just north of Philadelphia usually. And I decided I wanted to do an audio journal of being an entrepreneur, because I've been an entrepreneur since 2007.
Yeah.
Almost by accident, kind of was going to go in, get the experience to get the job, but you needed the experience to get the job, and I was going to do it that way. 15 years later, I'm still doing Goldstein Media. And so I was like, let me do a solo show, which who's going to listen to me talk for 15 minutes? No one did. And then I was like, well, I'm a former journalist. So I was like, I kind of went back into the old format of interviewing. And from then on, it's just at episode 11, which is really when I joined the network. That's episode 1 that people can actually listen to, is with Chelsea Craig of Rhino Reviews.
Yeah.
And we just kind of ran with it there. And it started picking up. People seem to like this format. I mean, I know, as you know too, Ian, that people like when you talk to other people, the pontifications. I feel like the only person that can really do pontifications is Evo Terra. He does a good job. He's even more an OG than I am.
Yeah. So the idea of the show is that you just wanted to talk about being an entrepreneur and talk about it with all these guys. And you've had some really great guests on the show. And I'm not going to ask you for a favorite episode or guest, because that'd be unfair. So I'm sure they're like your children. But what's been the highlights of doing the show?
I think one of them was kind of, and I will mention that I did have the Guy Kawasaki on the program.
I saw that.
That was kind of wild and really nerve-wracking. The guy's the sweetest guy out there. He's so humble and great. And that was a fun episode. I don't think it was my favorite episode. Sorry, Guy. But I think it was definitely a highlight of it. But just talking to these entrepreneurs And
Yeah.
hearing about the ups and downs and hearing that everyone has ups and downs is not
Hmm.
like people see success as in entrepreneurship and they
Hmm.
see it as they open the company and then they had success. They
Yes.
miss the 10 years in between of all the failures
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
prior to that. And even the year and a half, 2 years of not getting anywhere with the current iteration. And I like talking about that. And everyone's very open about like, look, this is not an easy job
Yeah.
being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So is that the highlight, is learning that it was actually it's a tough job being an entrepreneur, and
It
there are these
helps.
highs and lows, and
It
getting
helps with
behind the
my
scenes.
imposter syndrome too.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
we all
I can
face it,
imagine.
you know?
Yeah, I can imagine. What have you learned from these guests? I mean, the obvious question for me was, have you figured out the entrepreneur's enigma? Have you
Have to
figured
figure
out
out the
the
puzzle.
enigma?
I don't
Yeah,
think I think the enigma is always gonna be there. I
yeah,
think it's different for everyone. Everyone has their own puzzle to unwind, for lack of a better term. I feel like one of the biggest ones is that entrepreneurship is really effing hard.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it's not for the faint of heart, and there's nothing wrong with failing.
Mm,
Give it a year, give it 6 months, give it 3 years. Most entrepreneurs don't make it past 5 years.
yeah, yeah.
To be honest, Gold to me, it lasted 5 years. I had my child. I went to corporate for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Decided I did not like corporate one bit and came back to
Yeah,
Goldstein Media. So even Goldstein Media is not a straight 15-year shot.
right.
It was, let's start a business. Oh, I got a job. Make this a side hustle for a little bit.
Yeah,
Then brought it back to a full hustle again. So look, even Goldstein Media is version 1, version 2. Version 2
yeah.
is a lot less of a cluster F than the version 1. I can tell you that much. We're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and get right back to the show.
Hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
Have you seen a pattern in where entrepreneurs hit the wall a little bit, and where they fail? And have you seen the inverse, which is how they then succeed? Have you seen any common patterns with the 100 odd guests that you've spoken to?
100 odd guests. Still can't believe it's 100 guests. Jeez Louise. I mean, I keep in mind a few of them where I think that there's like a few solo shows in there. One
Yeah.
was when my Instagram was hacked and I had to do a PSA saying, "Don't follow that account. It's not me anymore." But
No.
that happens to the best of us. But the trend I've seen, a lot of founders have had failures
Hmm.
before their success or
Yeah.
before they're growing towards success in their current endeavor. A
Yeah.
lot of them are doing side hustles. I mean, I've talked to Jason, our fearless leader of our marketing podcast network, and this guy goes in-house, out of house, in-house, out of house, like it's
Hmm.
no tomorrow. It's fabulous because he's able to be an intrapreneur as
Yeah.
well as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I like talking to both. 'Cause a lot of times I'll have people that do side hustles
Yeah.
and aren't the full-fledged thing, and that's a way of doing it. You start up on the side till you feel like you can jump and go full time.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's interesting. And also, if I think about my relationship with Jason,
Mhm.
i.e., not really a relationship, just that I knew him, right?
Yeah.
On the social media for a long time. And you just know him as Jason Falls, right? He's the guy
Yeah.
that's doing whatever he's doing at the moment, but he's really built that entrepreneurship based on his personal brand, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the Jason Falls thing,
He's
right?
a name brand, I would say. I mean,
Yeah,
I think in our world of marketing, he's a name brand like Gary Vaynerchuk.
yeah, yeah,
Less
yeah.
obnoxious. More Kentucky, but less obnoxious.
Unpicking that again about where
Yeah.
you've seen the patterns with the entrepreneurs you've spoken to you said side hustle quite a few times there. So
Yeah.
talk about that. So do you think that the best way into entrepreneurship is to give something a try and then see if it works before you start giving up the day job?
I think it's different for everyone. I
Hmm.
really do. I think that like some people like myself, I was in sales for a little while, lost that job, Went back to Circuit City. Man, that shows my age. But I went back to Circuit City in the States. I was like kind of Best Buy.
Yeah, Circuit
And
City.
went back to Circuit City for
Yeah.
while I started the business up. So I was making like minimum wage, but I was still making a little bit of money while I started Goldstein Media up.
Yeah.
But then I just jumped. I was like, honestly, they told me to buy new shoes. My shoes weren't to code. And I said, this will cost me like 3 weeks worth of pay. So I'll
Yeah.
see you later. I quit because they wanted
Wow.
me to buy new shoes. My
Wow.
wife doesn't let me live that down. She's like, you quit because they want you to buy new shoes. I'm like, yeah, why? I'm working retail with no commission. I can't buy new shoes right now. So I left and then went out on my own. And I
Yeah.
feel like, but it's different for everyone. I know
Yeah.
people that are just like, I'm going to do my own thing. And like right out of
Yeah.
college, like, I'm going to do my own thing. And they do their own thing
Yeah.
and they've never looked back.
Yeah. And is that the range you've had of guests? Like people that
all
have,
over the place.
I mean, there's one guest I had, Kate Bradley Chernis, and
Yes.
she runs lately.ai. And
Wow, that's a great
her
place.
story is that she just discovered she couldn't work for people.
Mhm.
She found out she just couldn't work for people. And that was where her entrepreneur story started, because
A
she
lot of
just,
people feel that way.
yeah. And I wondered if you'd heard that a lot with your guests.
I know personally even that I don't think anyone could hire me at this point. 15 years in, I really think outside the box.
Uh-huh.
I'm doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And you're a CMO at a company and you have your branding podcast.
Yeah. So that was the success kind of thing. Going back to my original question, whether you've actually answered it, but what's the thing do you think that holds entrepreneurs back, that kind of stalls that story that you've
They're
been hearing?
scared. It's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, like when you think about, at least in the States, and there's ways in England where you are, but healthcare. And then also retirement, 401k, all that stuff is on you.
Yeah.
Like also, if there's no unemployment, like if Goldstein Media goes belly up, I gotta go find a job really quick.
Yeah.
Because there's no, I'm not giving to the unemployment commission because it's me.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting in the conversation you were having with Matt Bailey, who's also one of our fellow marketing podcast networkers. And he was talking about how his employees could all get mortgages and loans from the bank, home loans, I think. But he, as the owner of the business, was struggling with that.
Once again, it was like in the UK, but over here, like bank statements. I mean, the amount of proof I had to say that I'm actually making money, that I can float this loan.
Yeah.
Luckily, my wife had it was working in house somewhere, so she was able to say, "Hey, we got this fund here."
Yeah.
And then we have Seth still making. But yes, Seth makes money.
Okay. What you've learned from your entrepreneurs is the friction of that stuff, right? And some of the positives that you've learned is it often starts as a side hustle and then people turn it into a full-time thing. But let's get back to your full-time thing, because I'm sure your listeners probably know all about Goldstein Media.
I'm surprised some don't, actually. Some are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
not doing a good
exactly.
job of talking about it then.
So I thought I'd ask you the question. What is it that you guys do?
Yeah, so Goldstein Media is kind of the umbrella company for all my ADHD moments, I like to call them. Like, I want to do this. Let's put under Goldstein Media LLC. Let's do this. Let's do that. But predominantly, Goldstein Media is a web design shop. We focus on WordPress designs and development. We do SEO. We do some pay-per-click. We do digital marketing strategy for companies, mostly mid-sized companies, and we do some podcast production subsequently, because people have seen that I do podcast production and they want me to help them out with it. So I can help them out with the podcast production. So it's fun.
We're all figuring this out, aren't we?
Oh, it's all it is. You figure out. And the one tip I have for everyone is not NPR. It's not the radio. It can be off the cuff like this and just be fun.
What I take comfort from sometimes is, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and none of them are, let me say this about none of them that are on Marketing Podcast Network, is sometimes you listen to them and they're really well-established podcasts. You think, you didn't listen to this before it went live because your ad break just was stuck in the middle of the vocal or something broke. And when I hear and maybe that sounds cruel, but when I hear some of the great podcasts like go a little bit wrong, you think, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I mean, but also you got to realize a lot of podcasters, when they start, I mean, every time I start a podcast, they're rough.
Oh my God.
Oh, they're so rough. But then by 100, I've gotten to the point where I've come here to a friend of mine, Morty Oberstein, where he's like, you know who I am. Like, so I'm at the point where I'm like, you already know who I am. It's been almost 100 episodes. You know I'm Seth. Let's go to the guest.
I buried the first I think it's 4 episodes. They don't appear on any streams anymore.
I bet the first 10. The first 10 were a train wreck.
I think I was talking into the wrong end of the microphone for most of them. All right, so get back onto my questions.
Yes.
So, and I know from you being on my show that you were
Yeah.
a journalist before you founded Goldstein Media. So, what 15 years ago, as you made out? So, what inspired you to start your own firm? Your entrepreneur story.
Well, major burnout from journalism. I was a newspaper journalist. Remember newspapers? Wow.
Yeah.
It's almost as old as Circuit City there.
Yeah.
But I was a newspaper journalist, and I did a lot of emergency beat reporting. Saw some gnarly stuff. Major burnout from that. 14-hour days, sometimes 20-hour days, 7 days a week. Loved it. Overdid it. 6 years of that, and then I decided the whole time on the side, as if I wasn't busy enough, I was doing websites for fun and for people. And then I met my wife, and she's like, "Why don't you just go into web design? You've been doing this already for a while. Go back." So I went back to school, the University of Arts in Philadelphia, got a certificate, just to bone up on the skills a little bit. And then I started Goldstein Media. And I was like, to get the job that I never ended up getting.
Yeah. No, I like that part of the story when you were telling me on my podcast that you just built the job for yourself that you wanted to get, as it were. Yeah. I think that's cool.
With the intention of getting a job, that was the deal. My wife was like, "You're gonna get a job."
Yeah.
And 5 years later, I finally got a job, but it was doing social media. I wasn't doing web design, and then left that, and then back to this. So it's like,
so to ask you a couple of the questions you ask on this show on a regular basis that your listeners are going to be more familiar with than my questions. What's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
you set your schedule. You answer to only yourself, or in my case, my wife. God bless her. But generally, it's up to you to make it or break it. You're not answering to someone else who might not have it done right. If you screw up, it's your screw up, and you're like, "All right, well, I gotta fix that."
Yeah. And what's the worst thing about being an entrepreneur?
Same thing. I hate when people do that to me, but it's true. It's all on you. You know, either you make the cut this month, or you're not paying yourself as much this month, or you're not paying yourself at all because you're paying the bills first. You know, that kind of thing.
How do you find how are you with business development? That's always been, when I've talked to creatives who are really good at the work, or marketers, like, you know, I've done freelancing as well, and I love doing the work. It's the business development that kind of grinds you down. Are you good at the business development, or
I'm actually good at it. I found that, like, in the sales job that I was doing, I was selling construction boxes to construction sites. Boring. But when I'm selling digital marketing tactics and tools and doing websites, I'm actually better at the business development, talking about something I love to talk about, than the actual development of the stuff. That's the reason why I brought my trusty designer, Olivia. Sean Swaim, who's also on our network, he does SEO with me. You do what you're good at, and you hire for the rest.
That's
contract for the rest in my case. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I've been running this thing as my thing, I had somebody help me with BD. I knew that was my weakness. I need somebody to help me with BD. So absolutely. So the other thing is, I've talked about being a freelancer there, and we're talking about being an entrepreneur, and we're on Entrepreneurs Enigma. What do you think's the difference between being just a freelancer and being an entrepreneur? Have you seen that in your guests that you've spoken to?
I feel like a freelancer, at least in my mind, goes and embeds themselves in a corporation and is almost an employee on a contract.
Right.
Whereas an entrepreneur, you can do that too a little bit, but you're more coming in as an advisor or a consultant, and you're not embedding yourself as much in another company per se.
Right.
And you're running the business, you're doing more business development. You're not just finding a contract, working there for 6 months, then going to a next contract. So it's a little bit more freedom, and it's a lot more scary.
Well, you're building an asset, aren't you?
Exactly.
Yeah. So in running your own marketing shop for the last 15 years, what have you seen that's changed in terms of your focus and your customers' focus?
Well, I started out as just doing web design. And I've gradually tried kicking and screaming into SEO. And God bless it. Tried into paid search a little bit, kicking and screaming again. Strategy, social media, all that stuff. I've been like I've evolved the company as it's been, the industries have been evolving. Google decides to change something, the whole business has to change a little bit. And all that. So and adding on stuff as I see there's a need for that. Or it's been requested, kind of thing.
So that's the evolution you've seen. All right, and looking forward into the future and just winding this up because I've got to be cognizant of your audience and your rules, right? So we've just got, we're coming up to like 22 minutes, so I've got to be cognizant of that. So looking to the future, what can we expect in 2023 from this podcast and maybe the next 100 episodes?
Oh, wow. And the 100 episodes. That kind of sneaks up on you. But I think I'm going to have a lot more great guests. I think we are building out a community forum. So for the guests to intermingle, because my thing is all about networking. So it's come on in, let's everyone meet each other, because I feel like that's a kind of a core thing that could be an offshoot of Entrepreneurs Enigma, and eventually open it up to people who I want to invite. So I invited you to that this morning. I feel like there's more to Entrepreneurs Enigma than just a podcast per se, and I'm looking forward to trying to explore that avenue this year in 2023.
I think that's a really good idea because I feel it sometimes with Rockstar CMO is, you know, there I am like in the center of this sort of circle of people that are regular guests and my guests. And it'd be great to get those guys connected with one another, I think, as well. Yeah. So a community. So Entrepreneurs Enigma community we can all look forward to, can we?
It is, yes.
I look forward to that.
Slowly building that out. That's my shiny object syndrome a little bit. I'm like, oh, let's build it out and then make sure. Build it first and then see who comes.
I'm sure lots of people will come. And I'm hoping your listeners enjoyed me barging in here and asking you these questions. So I'm going to close the interview with the way I close interviews on my show.
Go for it.
When the listener spins a dial on the interwebs, where they're going to find you?
Mainly entrepreneursenigma.com, marketingpodcasts.net.
Yeah.
And then also on the interwebs, just look for Seth Goldstein. I'm everywhere.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Seth. Well,
thank you, Ian.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And I look forward to catching up with you soon. Enjoy the next 100 episodes.
And thank you for doing this and flipping the tables on me. This is fun.
That's all right. And thank you to your listeners for having me.
Awesome.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
That was a great show. Hey, if you're enjoying Entrepreneurs Enigma, please give us a review on the podcast directory of your choice. We're on all of them. And these reviews really help others find the show. Also, if you're getting value from the show and want to buy me a coffee, go to the show notes and click on the link to help me stay awake while I bring you more great episodes to your ears. That's in the show notes, and I look forward to the next episode. Take care, guys. Goldstein Media hopes you have enjoyed this episode. This podcast is one of the many great shows on the MPN Marketing Podcast Network.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Tim Hines hosts a great podcast called the Marketing Starter Podcast. Tim, tell these fine folks what they're going to get when they listen.
They're going to get great insights on how marketers can take an entrepreneurial attitude to what they do in marketing to be a little bit more successful. So I interview top marketers from all around the world, and heck, even some that are bottom and middle. It's really about marketers who embody the entrepreneurial spirit to be the best that they can be.
Awesome. Where can people subscribe?
They can, of course, subscribe on marketingpodcast.net, but they can also search for the show on all their favorite podcasting platforms, as well as visiting my website, which is tnhines.com/podcast.
You heard him. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.